This is video 2 for module 3, lesson 1. In the earlier lesson, we talked about the zero product property and how we can use that to solve equations. More specifically, or more importantly, we can go over a view here at the little property table. So here we can see that if A times B is equal to 0, then A has to be 0 or B has to be 0, or A equals B equals 0. So this is what we're going to use here. If you have a product of two things and their product is 0, that means one of those two things has got to be 0. This is super helpful when we're solving quadratic equations that can factor. If we can factor that quadratic equation and it's equal to 0, we can set each one of those factors equal to 0 and solve. I'm not going to walk you through this example here. I don't feel like it's very helpful in trying to understand properties here. We'll see more word problems like this in a later section, so we'll get to that later. Let's just take a look at some actual problems here. So looking at this quadratic, the first thing you want to try and tackle here, right, is to make sure it's equal to 0. If we're going to use the zero product property, we have to be equal to 0, and that's not what we have here. So we'll add 5 to both sides so that we now have equal to 0. 19 plus 5 is 24. And then we'll just factor this quadratic here. Again, we need two numbers that multiply to make what? 24. And then add to make what? Negative 11. So go ahead, try and factor here. Pause the video. Okay, hopefully you pause the video, and it should be negative 8 and negative 3. Those are your two answers there. So then, now we have two things that are multiplying, and our answer is 0. So we're going to go ahead and just set one of them equal to 0 and the other one equal to 0. Again, using that zero product property. Add 8 to both sides here, and you get x is 8. Add 3 to both sides here, x is 3. So those are our two solutions. Okay, let's try number 6. Number 6 is quadratic, and it's already equal to 0, but it doesn't have the c term. It's got the a term, which is 7. It's got b, which is 1, but c, well, it's 0. So we would need to think of two numbers that multiply to make 0, but add to make 1. Well, 0 and 1, right, would work. But then we'd have something like x plus 0 and x plus 1. Ooh, remember though here, our lead coefficient is 7, not 1. So we can't just use that normal strategy. We have to use the AC method here. Or another method we can use here is, well, there's a GCF, right? Let's use the GCF here. So let's just take out an x. And now we have a product of two things. So set each one of those equal to 0. And x equals 0 is just one of the answers. 7x plus 1 equals 0. And now we'll just solve that. So subtract 1 from both sides. Whoops. And I'll go up here. 7x equals negative 1. Divide both sides by 7. X is negative 1/7. And there are our two answers. Okay, number 7. What's the very first step we should do here? Make it equal to 0. So add 7 to both sides. We get 7r squared minus 14r plus 7 equals 0. And now we want to factor. Again, the first thing you should always check whenever you're factoring is there a GCF? And is there a GCF here? The answer is yes, there is. What can we factor out? We can factor out a 7. And now we have a lead coefficient of 1 here, so we can factor this quadratic just like using our normal strategy of what multiplies to 1 adds to make negative 2. Don't forget to keep bringing the 7 down as well. That's part of the equation. So anyway, multiplies to positive 1, adds to negative 2. It's going to be r minus 1 and r minus 1. And now we can set each one of these things equal to 0. 7 will never equal 0, so there's no solutions there. But r minus 1 can equal 0. Right? It's when r would be 1. Since we have the same number that happens twice, we call this a double root. Okay, number 8, and then we will stop the video there. In this case, right, there's no GCF. We can't divide any of these three terms by the same thing, except for 1, which isn't helpful. And we have a lead coefficient of 2, which means we'll have to use our AC method here. So the A here is 2, the C is negative 12, so we're going to do A times C, which will be 2 times negative 12, or negative 24. We want to find two numbers that multiply to 24, but add to that middle term there of 5. So So can you think of two numbers that multiply negative 24 and add to make 5? Positive 8 and negative 3. So we'll break the middle term up here using those two numbers. 5d becomes 8d minus 3d, and then we'll group the first two and group the second two. From this first group, factor out a GCF. What can we take out? 2d. And we're left with d plus 4. What can we take out from this group? Negative 3. And we're left with d plus 4. Factor out what's in common there. And there we have our zero product property. Set each factor equal to 0. And so we get d equals negative 4 and d equals 3 halves. Actually, we don't skip all those steps. I'll add the 3 to both sides there. And divide both sides by 2. d equals 3 halves. There are two solutions. Okay, thanks guys. We'll get into, that's the end of this video, and we'll get into the next lesson on the next video. Have a good day.